Right behind me is the brand new 2022 Honda Civic Si. Now this is slightly larger than Civic Si's of the past, but the overall philosophy remains the same. Inject some fun into their small car and make it really enjoyable on a windy back road. So today we're gonna take an in-depth look at this new Civic Si and find out if it's still the performance bargain that it always has been. Okay, before we drive the car, let's take a look at the design. I really like this color. I mean, this is amazing. Blazing orange. Come on, if you're gonna get a Civic Si, you have to get it in a good color like this. It looks awesome. And the one thing that I've noticed is that this car has a much cleaner, more mature look than the previous gen Civic. I love it. I didn't really like the kind of robotic turtle look of the previous gens, but I really like this. The length of the car is slightly longer than the previous gen. It's maybe about 1.5 inches longer. I mean, you can definitely feel that on the inside. It feels really big in there. So these wheels right here are special for the Si model, and they come in black only. So if you wanted them in any other color, sorry, you can't get that. But they are wrapped in these really great Goodyear Eagle F1s, which are summer tires, and they're really grippy. All right, so moving on to the back of this car, I really like the more mature look here. In my opinion, it's a great improvement over the previous gen. The taillights look awesome. And down here on the bumper, the previous gen had a whole bunch of kind of black plastic that I didn't really appreciate. Nothing here. This is nice and clean, really simple. Down here, check this out. Actual real exhaust tips. It's not plastic, that's real. It's not like a fake thing that you're looking at. And up here, I love this cute little adorable black spoiler. It's a nice contrast with the blazing orange paint. Onto the front, yes, we still kind of have the big corporate schnoz up here, whatever you want to call it, but it looks really good. And the Si gets these cool hexagons on the grille. I really like that. But over here on the side, this is kind of sad because this is where fog lights would go, and it seems as though we in the US don't get these. So under the hood is a 1.5 liter direct injected turbocharged 4-cylinder, making 200 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. Now this is mostly a carryover engine from the previous gen, but it actually on paper has slightly less horsepower. The previous gen made 205 horsepower, though now we have a broader torque curve. It gives you a little bit more pep at lower RPMs. So in the trunk, it's a decent amount of space. You can see all of my camera crap back here. There's a fair amount of space. It's pretty deep, and actually down here underneath, you'll find that there is no spare tire, but there is a pump in here, and there's another little space you can put more crap. And you got these pulls for the back seats, which is pretty handy. Now I'm 6'3", and with my seat set for myself, I actually have a fair amount of legroom. Headroom is pretty good. In the center, not quite as much space for my feet because you get that big hump in the middle there, but it's not bad back here. It is a little bit Spartan. You can kind of see where they sort of cheaped out on the materials. And no USB ports in the back, no vents, so your passengers won't be as happy as you would be in the front. This is a driver's car after all. All right, moving on to the front. I really love it in here. One of my favorite elements is this hexagon grille that kind of hides these vents. It looks awesome. The Si gets this really cool red stripe. Speaking of red, there's red stitching on the steering wheel, there's red stitching on the shifter, red stitching on the seats with these red inserts. And speaking of these seats, these are slightly different than the stock Civic seats. These are more supportive. They're really, really comfortable. And speaking of comfort, I'm 6'3", and I fit in here really well. I've got plenty of headroom, plenty of legroom, and I can even move this seat back kind of further back than I even really need it. So yeah, really comfortable in here. I really like the HVAC controls in here, really easy to use. You can pretty much use them without even looking at it, which is in stark contrast to the new GTI, which you have to stare at for like 7 minutes just to change the fan speed. So I really like this setup right here. The infotainment's really easy to use. It's very responsive. Of course, it's got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And look right here, a volume knob, which everybody loves. But check out the rear view camera. It's not really the best resolution. It's okay, but I've seen better. So are there really any negatives in here? Not that many. The biggest one is just kind of hard, scratchy plastics in areas that you will touch, like this door here. But you got to keep in mind that this is a car that's built to a price point. They want to keep this price down, keep it under $30,000. So I'm kind of okay with that, I guess. And the only other thing that I miss are heated seats. That's it. I think this is a really, really nice place. I love the fact that it's really simple, really clean, and not over-styled. All right, let's start with 0 to 60 time, which I'd argue for this car is really not all that important. It gets to 60 in about 7 seconds, which isn't really all that quick. By today's standards for this type of vehicle, it's kind of like family crossover territory. So yeah, in a straight line, not all that fast, but it's really when you get on a road like this, where you realize that 0 to 60 times don't really matter all that much. It's not about straight line performance. It's all about how the car can handle on a road like this. This road is pretty insane, and this car just eats it up. This engine's revvy, but it's not quite as revvy as some previous generation SIs. There's really not much noticeable turbo lag. Yeah, if you got the RPMs really low and you're lugging it in like third gear or something, you can feel it a little bit, but it's pretty responsive. Now we've got a limited slip differential, and that really helps us put the power down out of these corners without really a whole lot of wheel spin. It's really good. So in terms of raw speed, yeah, maybe it doesn't quite stack up to some of its competitors, but I don't know if that really matters, because what makes this car so good is something that some of its competitors don't have, is just the incredible steering. Honda just did it right in this car. It's so good. It's got really good feel. You actually get feedback from it, which is kind of rare nowadays. The chassis feels really well balanced, and it just sticks. And I think that has a lot to do with these awesome tires. Oh, it's so much fun. Yeah, you get a touch of understeer if you really try to push it a little bit too hard into a corner, but for the most part, it just sticks. So the previous gen had adjustable dampers. This one has fixed dampers. And you know, on paper that sounds worse. Maybe it is a little bit, maybe there's some subtle differences, but I don't know if most people are gonna notice that. Yeah, if you're like really pushing it on a racetrack or really pushing it down a canyon road, you might notice that difference. But I think the main difference would be just kind of how it would ride around town. And the ride's pretty good. Even in sport mode, it doesn't feel like overly aggressive, doesn't kill your back. As you'd expect from Honda, the shifter's really satisfying, it's precise, and you've got auto rev matching if you want. You can turn that off. I have it turned on right now just because it's kind of fun. But if you do feel like doing heel toe downshifting, the spacing's pretty good on the pedals. Speaking of revs, what a lot of people want to know about this new Civic Si is, does it have rev hang? Now that's basically when you are shifting from, let's say, third to fourth, and in between those gears, when you have the clutch pushed in, the RPMs just kind of hang. The RPMs kind of stay high, and when you get into that next gear, it's kind of jerky. The previous gen Civic Si had that, and this one, yes, it still has it. It's not really quite as bad, and honestly, it's never really bothered me, especially on a spirited drive. You never really think, oh crap, those revs are hanging. Yeah, occasionally here and there you might get a jerky shift, but it's really, I don't really think it's an issue. So in terms of the sound, it actually sounds pretty good, the exhaust sound. I'm not sure if it's piped in or not, but it sounds pretty decent. There are occasions when it can sound a little bit thrashy. Kind of reminds me of like a 80s quad 4 engine from General Motors. Yeah, that's not a great thing, but there's a few times when it sounds a little coarse. But in general, it sounds pretty decent. It's got 3 driving modes: normal, sport, and individual. And in the individual mode, you can change some settings, but I just tend to leave it in sport mode. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this Civic is a fair amount larger than the previous gen, and you can definitely feel it. It feels like a slightly larger car, and that's gonna make your daily driving livability a whole lot better. But it does kind of feel like a big car. I recently drove the Hyundai Veloster N and I loved it. And one of the things that I adored about that car was how small it was, and it made it just feel so nimble. This one feels nimble, but you definitely feel like you're driving a larger car. You have more mass to move around. And this is a whopping 8 pounds lighter than the previous gen. I don't know if you'll feel that at all, but it's something. They saved some weight somewhere, but somehow gas mileage isn't quite as good. This averages 31 instead of 32. And what am I averaging right now? Let's take a quick look. Oh, yeah, I'm averaging 23.8. That's probably because I often drive like an idiot. I think I've spent most of my time in this car driving like an idiot. Not many highway miles. So yeah, I'm sure you could do a lot better if you drive like a normal person. If you buy an SI, you really owe it to yourself to drive it on roads like this as much as possible, because it is really enjoyable. It's really fulfilling in this vehicle. It can get around these turns better than some much more expensive sports sedans. It's also just a great daily driver. Pop it into normal mode and the ride's not too harsh. It's not too loud, doesn't have stupid exhaust burbles that will drive your neighbors nuts. You can fit a car seat in the back if you want to cart your kids around. There's a lot of legroom, there's a lot of headroom. It's really comfortable. There's a lot to like here. All right, let's talk about price. The MSRP is $27,500 and you pay $395 extra for this awesome blazing orange paint. With destination, we're looking at just under $29K. That's a big jump up from the last gen model, especially when you consider that we no longer have adaptive dampers or heated seats. But still, considering where car prices have headed in the last couple years, this much fun and performance under $30K is becoming rare. So how does this compare to a GTI? The GTI is quicker, maybe the style is a little bit better, but it's more expensive, and the interior on the new GTI is not really very good. So how about the Elantra N-Line? The N-Line is much cheaper, but it actually has 1 more horsepower, but it's not as quick. There's no LSD, the manual transmission isn't as good as the Hondas, but it could be a good option for a slightly sporty sedan on a budget. So what about the Elantra N? The Elantra N is more expensive at around $33K, but it has way more power, 276 horsepower to be exact, and adjustable shocks. But the styling is weird, which may or may not be for you. What about the new WRX? The new WRX also has quite a bit more power. It's a bit quicker, and it's not that much more expensive than the SI. That said, I'm not sure the WRX will match the SI in terms of steering feel and just how good the Honda shifter is. There's a reason why the Civic Si has such a great reputation. It's a perfect blend of performance and daily driving livability. And this latest gen, even with the blazing orange paint, isn't too flashy or overdone. Yeah, I missed the hatchback SI, which would have made it even more practical. And from a numbers standpoint, it doesn't appear to be much of an advancement over the last one. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. Yeah, it doesn't have a whole lot of power, but it's just so much fun to drive. And just like all the Civic SIs of years past, it's still a phenomenal value. So if you want a really fun car that will put a smile on your face without sacrificing your wallet, the Civic Si still is really hard to beat. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so you can get notified of all my new car reviews, used car reviews, and updates on my fleet of mostly broken and terrible vehicles. If you'd like to help support the show, please consider buying a t-shirt at helloroad.tv/shop. You can also support the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/helloroad. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're well, and I'll see you soon.